They say dead men tell no tales. I wish that had been true. From the shadows behind a tree, not 20 feet from the church steps, I watched her smile. Same smile she used to give me when I brought home donuts on a Sunday morning. That crooked grin that made me believe in safety, in love, in us. She wore white. Again. Just like she had the first time. Only this time, the man standing beside her wasn't me. And the first time she wore it, it was to say goodbye to me over a closed casket that didn't even contain my body. That coffin was empty. And no one noticed. No one even questioned how the autopsy was waived. No one asked why there was no viewing. No one blinked when the paperwork came back saying Jonathan Ames, deceased. They just signed, sealed, and shoved me into the ground without so much as checking whether I was really inside. She didn't wait long. 6 months, give or take. That's all it took for my so-called grieving wife to walk the aisle again, this time with her old family friend, Landon Heath, who had helped with our garden and just wanted to be there for her. I remember him. I remember how he shook my hand like it was made of glass, like he didn't want to touch something that belonged to her. I didn't cry when I saw her kiss him. I didn't scream when they released white doves in the same spot my memorial had taken place. I just stood there like an unwanted ghost at the edges of a life that used to be mine. And here's the worst part. She looked happy. Happier than I remember her ever being with me. Her hands didn't shake when she slipped on the ring. She didn't look like someone haunted by grief or guilt. She looked free. Free of me. So why didn't I stop her? Because back then, I still hoped it was all a misunderstanding. I told myself maybe she didn't know. Maybe she believed I really died in that gas station explosion. Maybe the man they pulled from the rubble really looked like me. Maybe she just needed comfort and made a mistake. I clung to those excuses like a coward. But they started falling apart the moment I saw the footage. I had gone to the storage unit we used to rent. My name was still on the contract. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof of who I used to be? Memories? But what I found was a plastic storage tub labeled TripVids. Inside, a flash drive. And on that flash drive, a video from 2 weeks before the explosion. It was filmed in our kitchen. Shaky, blurry. Her voice laughing off-screen. And Landon, shirtless, pouring her wine, touching her like I didn't exist. She was never grieving. She was waiting. Waiting for the insurance payout. Waiting for me to stay dead. Waiting to start a new life, our life, without me in it. And you know what haunts me most? It worked. For years, it worked. Until I showed up at their anniversary dinner. And that, Reddit, is where everything started to unravel. I keep replaying that morning like it's trapped inside a cracked VHS tape, shaky, grainy, but endlessly looping. I remember the smell of burnt toast. The distant sound of the neighbor's leaf blower. Shauna was in the kitchen, humming softly, pouring coffee into that blue mug I always hated, but she claimed was lucky. She didn't kiss me goodbye. That's what still stings the most. No kiss, no glance, not even a fake, I love you. Just a distracted, don't be late, like I was heading to the store, not straight into a fireball. It was a routine stop. A gas station I'd gone to 100 times before. I had no idea that day would end with black smoke curling into the sky and my name listed under confirmed fatalities in local news. I didn't see it coming. I barely remember the blast. Just a blinding light, a ripping sound in my ears, then darkness. Thick, swallowing darkness. They say I crawled out half-conscious. That I was pulled from the wreckage by an off-duty EMT who thought I was a bystander. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even remember my own name. My ID must have been thrown clear, or maybe someone made sure it disappeared. I was tagged John Doe, sent to a hospital 2 towns over, and left to recover in a haze. No visitors. No phone calls. No headlines saying they found someone alive. It's almost like no one was looking. Weeks passed. My brain started stitching things together. First my name. Then her face. Then the horrifying realization that someone had been buried in my place. And instead of questioning it, instead of fighting for the truth, Shauna accepted it. No, embraced it. At first, I thought she just moved on too fast. That maybe her grief was twisted, that she clung to someone for comfort, and things got complicated. I told myself that over and over again, even when it made my stomach churn. But then I started thinking about the little things. How she'd insisted I fill up at that station. How she called just moments before the explosion, making sure I was still on the way. And how, in the weeks leading up to it, she kept pushing life insurance paperwork into my hands like it was part of some new adulting trend. There were red flags. I was just too blind to read them. I tried to reach out after I left the hospital. I sent letters, emails, I even called from a borrowed phone. Nothing. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. The world had already turned the page. I drifted for a while after that. Stayed in shelters. Took cash jobs under fake names. Tried to tell myself that maybe starting over was a gift in disguise. But how do you move on when your past is still living your life, wearing your ring, sleeping in your bed? The answer came to me in the most unexpected way, through a man named Carl Withers, who used to work with Landon at the county office. I ran into him by sheer coincidence at a hardware store in Denton. He squinted at me like he was seeing a ghost. I laughed it off. But then he said something that shook me. "Man, you really do look like that guy, the one Landon used to always talk about." Said he felt guilty, real guilty. That word, guilty. Carl didn't know the details. But he remembered Landon saying something about things going smoother than expected after the accident. And that's when it clicked. Landon wasn't just the man who came after me. He was already there long before I was gone. And Shauna? She wasn't blindsided by my death. She may have orchestrated it. That night, I stayed up in a cheap motel room with peeling wallpaper and a buzzing ceiling fan that sounded like a dying fly. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I could be so disposable to someone I gave my life to. Wondering if she ever once regretted it. Wondering if she lay awake at night, afraid I might one day walk through the door. She should be. Because I'm done hiding. The anniversary dinner is 3 days away. And I've got a plan. I'm not out for revenge. I'm not that guy. I don't have the spine for it. But I am going to find out the truth. I need to know if she signed my death certificate with a pen or a knife. You don't realize how strange it is to stand in a room full of laughter and know that none of it was ever meant for you, especially when the people clinking glasses are toasting a love that was only made possible by your so-called death. I stood outside the restaurant for nearly an hour before I convinced myself to go in. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, exactly, something worse. That confused, sinking paralysis you feel when the truth is about to punch you in the teeth. The place was nicer than I expected. Candlelight, linen napkins, a live cellist playing something too beautiful for people like them. I was told they'd booked a private room in the back. A small gathering, the hostess said. Just family and friends. I almost laughed. Whose family? Mine had moved to Ohio. Her parents had always hated me, and Landon, well, his family didn't even come to his first wedding. But they were all here now, smiling, sipping wine, wearing expensive clothes that shimmered under golden chandeliers. And then I saw her. Shauna. She was wearing the same dress I buried in a suitcase years ago when we moved to our first apartment. Ivory silk with tiny silver embroidery across the chest, something she once said she'd only wear on a night worth remembering. I guess celebrating our shared life counted. Landon had his hand on the small of her back. Possessive. Comfortable. Like he wasn't touching another man's wife. Like he didn't help erase me to get to this moment. I stood behind a pillar and just watched. Watched her smile. Watched her lean into him. Watched her raise a glass and say to second chances. And I swear to you, for a moment, the world tilted. My knees buckled just slightly. Because I was the first chance. I was the original. The one she promised to love until death. I didn't realize she meant my death engineered, convenient, and neatly processed with flowers and a eulogy. I couldn't bring myself to interrupt. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the front desk, gave a fake name, and ordered a drink at the bar like any regular customer. I sipped bourbon and stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the liquor bottles. I barely recognized myself. Scruffy, worn down, shadows under my eyes from too many sleepless nights. I didn't look like someone who was back from the dead. I looked like someone who had never been allowed to live. It was then that I saw her walking toward the restroom. Alone. I didn't think. I just followed. I caught her just as she stepped into the hallway. "Excuse me," I said, barely above a whisper. She turned. Her smile froze. Her glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile. She stared at me like I was a hallucination. Like I'd grown from the floor. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Not at first. And then, finally, a breathless whisper, "Jonathan." I nodded once. She stepped back. Not because she was scared. Because she was calculating. I could see it in her eyes, the flash of panic, the way her pupils darted toward the dining room, the way her hands twitched slightly like she was about to reach for something that wasn't there. "Are you real?" she asked. I didn't answer. She leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Why now? Why now? Not how are you alive? Not oh my God, I thought you were dead. Just why now?" That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't confused. She wasn't shocked. She was angry that her perfect little lie had just grown legs and walked back into her life. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You looked beautiful at the funeral." She flinched. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, frozen in silence. I didn't make a scene. Not yet. I wanted her to sit back down at that table with a smile on her lips and terror in her chest. This wasn't revenge. This was truth seeping in through the cracks. And next time, I wouldn't be so quiet. I don't know what I expected after that hallway encounter. Maybe that she'd come running after me, begging for answers, pretending she didn't know what really happened. Or maybe she'd cry and collapse, overwhelmed by the sudden reappearance of her supposedly dead husband. But none of that happened. I sat back down at the bar, and she simply returned to her dinner, like nothing had happened. Like I was just a passing ghost, too inconvenient to acknowledge. I watched her through the mirror. Her laugh was a little tighter now. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Every now and then, her gaze would flick toward the hallway behind her, and her hand would twitch on the stem of her wine glass. But she didn't leave. She didn't say a word to Landon. She just sat there, performing. And I sat there, unraveling. That night, I didn't sleep. I booked the cheapest motel I could find an hour outside the city, a one-floor structure with peeling walls, buzzing neon, and a broken heater that coughed warm air like it was trying not to die. I lay awake on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling fan as it made that slow, pathetic turn like it couldn't even be bothered to finish a full revolution. Her voice was in my head. That whisper, "Why now?" Like I was the inconvenience. Like I was the mistake. I didn't know how deep this went, but I had to find out. I needed answers, not to punish, not to expose, but just to understand. That's what no one gets. It's not about revenge when you've lost everything. It's about making sense of the silence. The next morning, I made a detour. There was one place she hadn't scrubbed me from. My name was still on the lease to the old storage unit 2 towns over. She probably forgot. Or maybe she assumed I'd never need it again. I hadn't opened that door in years, but the key still worked. The moment it clicked open, dust exploded in the air like it was angry I had returned. Inside were boxes I had packed back when I still believed in anniversaries and matching pajamas. Photos, souvenirs, broken things I once planned to fix. But in the back, behind a stack of old lamps, I found a sealed plastic container marked "Personal, do not trash." It wasn't mine. Inside, I found letters. Dozens of them. Some addressed to Elle, some to my real life, some to no one at all. They were in her handwriting. And as I sat on the concrete floor, my back against cold metal, I read every one of them until my fingers started shaking. The first letter was dated 3 months before the explosion. It read, "You keep asking when. When we'll be free. When I'll stop pretending. I just need a little more time. He's too soft to suspect anything." Another one, closer to the incident. "I hate how easy it's become. He doesn't even look at me like he used to. I think he knows something's wrong, but he won't ask. It's like he's begging to be replaced." And then one that made my stomach twist. I looked up gas station layouts today. His route always passes by the same one. It's isolated. It would only take a spark. I dropped the letter. My chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. There were more. So many more. Plans. Timelines. Mentions of insurance. Mentions of fake grief. Mentions of Landon picking the right time to step in. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't grief. It was a blueprint. I don't remember leaving the storage unit. I just remember driving aimlessly until the sun dipped below the hills and the headlights from passing trucks blurred into nothing. I parked behind a diner and sat there for hours, shaking, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, asking myself the same question over and over. Was I ever loved? Because it doesn't feel like I ever existed to her, not as a person. I was a placeholder. A first draft. A stepping stone. But not anymore. That night, I made a copy of every letter. Every single page. I uploaded them to a private drive. I sent them to a lawyer I found online who offers free consultations to veterans. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew it needed to be big enough that she couldn't ignore it. I'm not strong. I'm not brave. I'm not even sure I'm sane. But I do know this. The woman who looked me in the eye and asked, "Why now?" is about to learn that not all ghosts stay buried. And I'm not done haunting her. The funny thing about secrets is they always make someone sweat. And if you sit still long enough, you'll see who wipes their forehead first. That's how I knew where to press next. Not Shauna. Not Landon. But their friend. Her best friend. The one who gave the toast at their wedding. The one who hugged her at my funeral while pretending her mascara streaks were tears. Sabrina. I hadn't spoken to her in years. We were never close, really. She always treated me like some boring accessory Shauna wore too long. But something told me she knew more than she let on. People like her, they live on the edge of drama, but they're terrified of being dragged into the middle of it. That's a lever you can pull if you're careful enough. So I found her. Or rather, I waited until she found me. I knew where she jogged. The same park every morning. Her playlist was loud enough to be heard from 20 feet away. She always wore the same fluorescent jacket. I didn't approach her. Not yet. I made sure she saw me, once, twice, 3 times, just passing by, like a phantom flickering on the edge of her routine. And on the 4th morning, she cracked. She came to me, breathless, pale, eyes darting like a trapped bird. "Jonathan," she asked, barely audible over her gasps for air. "Is that really you?" I just nodded. She sat down on a bench, didn't even ask permission. Her hands were trembling. I went to your service," she said. I held Shauna's hand. I watched her break. I watched her lie. I interrupted. She blinked hard. Didn't deny it. Just looked away. "I didn't come to scream," I told her. "I didn't come to threaten. I came because I need someone to tell me what actually happened. And I think you want to tell me." She was silent for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "She told me you were depressed." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Me? Depressed? Sure. I was tired. Sure. I was worn out from trying so hard to fix a marriage that had already collapsed behind my back. But depressed enough to be painted as unstable? That was a new one. She said you were distant. Obsessive. She said you used to talk about death like it was some kind of relief. And she told me that maybe, when it happened, it was what you wanted. I was stunned. I couldn't even speak. That was her story? That I chose to vanish in a fireball? Sabrina looked ashamed even saying it aloud. "I didn't believe her at first," she said. "But she showed me photos. Texts. Messages that looked like you were spiraling. I think she faked them. I think she built that story for me. Why would she go to all that trouble?" I asked. And then Sabrina gave me the answer I wasn't ready for. Because I caught them. Her and Landon. I caught them together. Before the accident. My mouth went dry. "I didn't tell anyone," she whispered. Because she made it seem like she was stuck. Like you were hurting her emotionally. Like she was trying to protect herself. I never thought. I didn't think she'd do something. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just me who had been manipulated. It was everyone. Shauna had crafted her narrative like a playwright. The victim. The grieving widow. The brave woman reclaiming her life after tragedy. And Sabrina? She was one of her props. A useful alibi. A built-in witness. I pulled out my phone. Opened the folder. Showed her the letters I found. Let her read every word. She covered her mouth. Her shoulders started to shake. "She lied to everyone," I said. "But now she's trapped. She doesn't know what I'll do. And if she thinks you're helping me." "I'm not helping anyone," Sabrina said quickly. But her voice cracked. "I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. "But you do now." We sat there for a while, both frozen in the weight of what she finally saw. And when she left, she didn't say goodbye. She just walked fast, like the sidewalk might collapse beneath her. Later that day, she sent me a message. 3 words. "She's hiding something." And attached was a photo. A safe. Hidden behind a panel in the wall of the home I once shared with Shauna. A home she'd redesigned with Landon. A safe I never knew existed. It was time to go home. And this time, I wouldn't be knocking. I parked 2 blocks away. That's all I could handle. Even after everything, the letters, the betrayal, the funeral I never agreed to, there was still something sacred about that driveway. About the porch light that blinked twice when the weather changed. About the house number that we once carved into a wooden sign together because she said store-bought looks too cold. I had built that home with my hands, literally. Spent weekends hammering in the deck boards, crawling through insulation, rewiring the kitchen when the lights flickered. And now it was just a stranger's shell. I waited until the street was dark. It was late, around 2:30 in the morning, and their curtains were drawn. The motion light had burned out, or maybe they just never fixed it. The side gate was still loose on its hinge. That felt like some cruel joke. I used to complain about that thing every time it squeaked, and she'd always say, "Add it to your man list." Well, I guess I finally got around to it, just a little late. I got in through the back. The lock hadn't changed. Either she'd forgotten, or she thought there was no point. Maybe she really believed I'd stay gone forever. But it clicked open like it always had, like muscle memory didn't know I was a ghost now. The house was still, not quiet. Still, like the kind of silence that waits. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I still knew every creak in the floorboards, every edge of the kitchen counter, every corner where the shadows used to fall when we watched movies at night. My feet moved like I'd never left. Sabrina's message said the safe was hidden in what used to be my office, now a study, according to the real estate listing I found when I went digging. The door stuck a little, just like it always had. I slid it open and stepped inside. The bookshelves were different. My old records were gone. But the wall? The one behind the framed painting of the lake we never visited? That hadn't changed. The panel was flush, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. I found the gap in the trim, slipped my fingers in, and popped it open. And there it was. The safe. Not large. Not flashy. Just matte black and deeply out of place in a home that claimed nothing to hide. I tried the birthday code first, hers. Didn't work. Then the anniversary. Still no luck. And then, on a hunch, I punched in the date of my death. 6 digits that felt like ash in my mouth. It opened. The first thing I saw was a manila envelope. Thick. Worn at the edges. My name was scrawled across the front in her handwriting, but not Jonathan. She had written J, like she couldn't bring herself to spell it out. Like even in private, my name was too much for her to see. Inside, legal forms. Copies of the insurance payout. A second life insurance policy I never signed. Forged. My signature mimicked with shaky precision. And worst of all, hospital forms. Dated 3 weeks after the explosion. Internal notes from a facility across the state that said something I'll never forget. Subject admitted as John Doe, suffering from post-traumatic amnesia. No known ID. Possible exposure to blast. Observation recommended. And scribbled in the corner, in pen. Matched a photo? Too risky to follow up. Leave it alone. She knew. She knew. She found me. She let me rot in a hospital bed with no name while she hosted dinner parties in the house I built. While she spent insurance money that came from signing my name over in lies. While she let me disappear, fully aware that I was alive. I started shaking. My whole body. I dropped the envelope and had to grip the edge of the shelf just to breathe. I thought I'd seen the worst of her. But no. She hadn't just erased me. She'd seen me wounded, helpless, and walked away. There was more in the safe. A small box, red velvet, tucked behind the papers. I opened it, hands numb. Inside was a wedding ring. My ring. The original. The one I lost in the crash. Or thought I did. Why would she keep it? Not as a memento. Not as guilt. No. She kept it as a trophy. The final piece of the puzzle. The last proof that the job had been done. I put it in my pocket. I didn't take anything else. Just the box of evidence, the forged documents, and the one thing she never thought I'd see again, the truth in her own handwriting. I was almost at the back door when the hallway light flicked on upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. A shape paused at the landing. Landon. His voice was groggy. Shauna? Did you hear that? I slipped out before he reached the bottom step. Back into the cold. Back into the dark. Back into the body I never really left behind. And this time, I wasn't running anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Again. I sat in the car with the envelope on the passenger seat and the box in my lap, watching my breath fog up the windshield until morning light filtered through the trees like the day didn't know how dark the night had just been. I kept staring at that ring in my hand, flipping it over like it might whisper a reason. Something about the weight of it made me feel like I was still wearing it, like I never really took it off, like I never got a choice. That morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to the cops. Not yet. They don't know how to handle things like this. Not when it's a matter of lies laced through a marriage, forged signatures, and emotional landmines. I didn't want a legal battle. I didn't want jail time. I wanted something else. I wanted her to feel seen. So I reached out to Sabrina. At first, she didn't answer. I figured maybe she was scared, or maybe Shauna had gotten to her. But then, hours later, she texted me a single sentence that made me freeze. Come to dinner. I'll make sure she's there. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message. Then I checked the address. It wasn't a restaurant. It was Sabrina's house. Neutral ground. Clean, bright, with a glass-top table and a view of the hills. And it was set for 4. I showed up wearing the same coat I'd worn to my last date night with Shauna, not because I thought she'd notice, but because I remembered. Because I wanted to walk in already wrapped in the memory of a life she torched. Sabrina opened the door with a stiff smile and barely looked me in the eyes. She whispered, She doesn't know. Then she gestured toward the living room and disappeared into the kitchen. There she was, Shauna, sitting with a glass of red wine, scrolling through her phone like nothing in the world had teeth. Like there wasn't a man she buried standing 10 feet away. For a second, I just watched her, absorbed the moment, memorized the curve of her shoulder, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the little annoyed twitch she always did when she was waiting too long for someone else. Then she looked up. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. She just blinked. Once. Twice. And then set her glass down slowly. "Jonathan," she said, voice flat. I sat across from her. Neither of us moved. The silence wasn't awkward. It was lethal. "I was wondering how long it would take," she said finally. "To what?" I asked. "To notice I wasn't dead? Or to realize you should have finished the job?" Her lip twitched. But no apology. No shame. Just that cold, methodical control she always used when cornered. "What do you want?" she asked. I leaned forward. "The truth. On record. In front of someone who doesn't owe you anything anymore." She glanced toward the kitchen, where Sabrina was pretending to stir something that didn't exist. "You brought her into this?" Shauna said, eyes narrowing. "No," Sabrina said, stepping out. "You did. The minute you let me cry over a man you knew wasn't gone." The air shifted, and that was when I pulled out the envelope and dropped it on the table. The sound it made was small, but Shauna flinched. "I found the safe," I said. "I read everything. The letters, the forged forms, the transfer receipts, the hospital records. You knew I was alive. You chose not to care." Her eyes darted to Sabrina. "You think this is justice?" She spat. "You're pathetic, Jonathan. You always were. That's why it was so easy. You let people walk over you. You begged for scraps. And when you finally get your spine back, it's too late." I stared at her. "Do you even feel anything?" I asked. "For what you did. For what you became." And then she said it, the most honest thing I think she's ever said to me. "I felt trapped. You were small. Predictable. You gave me everything, and I wanted more. That's all." Sabrina stepped back like she'd been slapped. I should have been angry, furious. But all I felt was relief. Like a rotten tooth finally yanked from the gum. "You'll lose everything," I said. "The lies, the fraud, the forged documents, it's all in here." But she didn't flinch. She stood up slowly, collected, elegant in her cruelty. "And if you think that's enough to ruin me," she said, "then you never really knew me at all." She turned and walked out, left the door open behind her like a woman who'd never been afraid of consequences. Sabrina didn't say anything for a long time. She just looked at me, not with pity, not with anger, just with a kind of quiet grief. "She used me too," she said. "I was never her friend. I was her shield." "I know," I said. And then she did the one thing I never expected. She handed me a flash drive. She sent me this. Told me to delete it. I didn't. I couldn't. It's her confession. A voice memo. She didn't name you, but it's all there. I took it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing. Not free. Not whole. But awake. I didn't press play on the flash drive right away. I stared at it for hours. I held it in my hand while the sun went down, while the shadows in the motel room crept across the floor like old regrets. I was scared. Not of what I'd hear, but of what it would mean. That everything I believed about her was true. That the woman I loved had been planning my exit long before I ever disappeared. When I finally listened, her voice filled the room. Calm. Almost bored. It was like hearing a stranger wear your memories like a secondhand coat. He wouldn't stop loving me. That was the problem. I needed space, power, room to breathe. And he just kept handing me more affection like it was currency. I told Landon we'd figure something out. I didn't mean for it to go that far, but when it did, it was cleaner than I expected. And maybe that's when I realized I didn't need permission to be free. There it was. Confession, wrapped in convenience. Cold, but clear. Enough to bury her career, her social circle, her carefully curated image. I could have taken it to a lawyer, to the police, to her employer, to Landon. I had all the cards now. I could finally destroy what she built on top of my grave. But something strange happened. I didn't want it anymore. Because somewhere between that hallway in the restaurant and the click of her voice through my headphones, I stopped needing to be the victim. She had already lost the one thing I never could, a conscience. She'd have to live the rest of her life dodging the truth, knowing someone out there had it, knowing her freedom was on borrowed time. I didn't need to chase her down. She'd always be running. Instead, I packed my things. Every copy of the documents, every piece of evidence, the flash drive, all of it went into a fire pit behind the motel. I watched the flame eat away the lies. Page by page, sentence by sentence. I let it go. Not for her. Not to forgive. But to live. I drove west. I didn't even check the map. I just watched the road unravel in front of me and decided to follow it until I didn't recognize the names on the signs anymore. I started over in a quiet town with wide streets and no ghosts. Found work fixing up an old hardware store. The owner, a grumpy guy named Floyd, gave me a job after I fixed his cash register without being asked. I got an apartment. Small, but warm. I planted herbs on the windowsill. I stopped waking up with panic in my chest. And on one ordinary afternoon, I met someone, by accident, at a farmer's market of all places. Her name was Claire. She asked me about basil. I told her I knew a thing or two. She laughed like she meant it. She never asked about my past. I never offered it. But one evening, months later, I told her everything. Not to make her feel sorry for me, just to see if I could finally speak it aloud without falling apart. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She just said, "You made it out." And that's when I realized I did. I was never supposed to survive. I was meant to be a memory, a photograph on a mantle, a story she told at parties when she needed to feel like someone had once adored her. But I survived. I rebuilt. I loved again, this time without conditions. And the best part? I did it without becoming like her. Because the greatest revenge is no longer needing one.